Hi, this is Neve G, and I'm here with Erin, who is a curious girl in her late 20s, and she wanted to talk about sacred sexuality and just kind of had some questions about it. So I said, yeah, you can interview me on my podcast. That sounds so fun. So thank you, Erin, for being here. And if you want to add anything to that, please do.
Yeah, so where this curiosity came from actually was from the first conversation that we had, me, you, and my mom. And you mentioned sacred sex during that conversation, and you really sparked my interest. And that was some months ago now. It was the summer, I believe. Yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm just curious, and I feel like curious and ready to think about past sexual experiences and look forward to future sexual experiences and planning positive sexual experiences as time goes on.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you because I think that being single and starting on this sacred relationship, awakened sexuality journey, it's it can be a lot easier, healthier when you start alone exploring that before you find someone, because then you set really great foundation for the relationship itself, but also for what you both might want or not want from your sexual relationship too. So
That's a good point. Yeah, and I think that was one of my questions. Like, is it only possible to practice with two people? Can it be practiced alone? Can it be practiced with more than two people in a group setting? Which probably the answer is yes to all those questions. I'm not
I
sure.
would, yeah, I would say yes. The answer is yes to all those questions. As far as I'm concerned, in my own experience, I think it's great for women of all ages, like whenever you're starting to feel sexual, to start creating a sacred sexual meditation practice, which could end in masturbation, but doesn't necessarily have to. Um, one of the things that's really helpful for having, for actually getting to sacred sex, which I guess we should probably define it, or I'll
Mm,
define it. So, sacred sexuality to me is a practice of embodying and becoming the energy and expression of love in the world. So, it's not as a mean to try to get love, but more of a transformative path where you become love. So, spiritual, sexual, and creative energy, I see them together. And that love energy works in us and through us. So, we literally become an embodied expression of love. And it does change you. If you start to look at where it comes from, like in ancient cultures, most ancient cultures in their spiritual practices had some form of sacred sexuality. And they for most of them, the goal was really spiritual enlightenment or, you know, bypassing the mind, actually calming the monkey mind. Or, the reasons weren't exactly just to have like a deep relationship with your partner or, something that we might use sex for now, especially like conscious or mindful or awakened sex, really is just to have a deeper relationship, probably with our partner and a loving, like where it's not, anyone using each other or whatever. But for ancient cultures, at least when you're thinking about the Taoists and Tantra, so there was Yoga Tantra, like India, but there was also Buddhist Tantra, Chinese, like they had Chi. I mean, the Egyptians had the high sex magic of Isis and Horus. So, like, there were so many different ancient cultures doing this over different periods of time, but it really was for enlightenment or because it's the most powerful energy we have. Um, I know I'm talking a lot, but I want to say one more thing, and then I'll let you comment. The interesting thing to me, one of the reasons why I'm so focused on bringing this back to people is because I think it was purposely shut down because it is like the most powerful energy we have as humans. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating when you start to look at those cultures and why they were doing it and what it potentially could do.
it's so interesting. And yes, I agree on the shut down on purpose. I mean, when we just start to investigate anything, it's so clear. Um, and yeah, my friend and I were talking about Tantra the other day. And I know it's going to be a unit at the end of my yoga teacher training course. and she practices Tantra, my friend. And I asked her, like, does sacred sex fall under the umbrella of Tantra, or does Tantra fall under the umbrella of sacred sex? And maybe like neither of those questions are even uh, like correct to ask, but it's so, so cool. And it's making me think now of the aim of yoga is to connect yourself with source. And it sounds like that's the aim of sacred sex too. So it's like a different avenue to achieve the same goal of, yeah, like being that light energy, being that love energy and connecting.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. It is to be one with the divine or one with the oneness of the universe. That's pretty much the goal. I mean, sometimes it was depending on what text you find and what you read, maybe it was to have other powers and influence in other, it can get pretty crazy when you get into it. But as far as so Tantra yoga, like, it's a huge umbrella, right? It's like Tantra is being with the divine while you do the dishes. I mean, tantra is weaving. It means to weave, and it's weaving the divine into everything. So if tantra is the umbrella of a type of yoga, right? Because there's so right, tantra is one umbrella. A really tiny little part of it was tantric sex.
Mm.
Just there was only a small group, and that's what I learned in my teacher training. Whatever, 10 years ago. But it's like there was a small group of yogis that were like, oh hey, tantra, if we're being tantra's really the yoga for us, for people that are living in the world and doing stuff. It's like we can't just skip out on society and go meditate on a mountain. Like, no, right? We're here doing our work in the world, teaching, sharing with people, whatever our jobs are. And so tantra to me is like the modern, especially the woman, but modern people's yoga. Is that accessible to, like, okay, how do we weave the divine into doing these mundane things? And something that we all do that hopefully not too mundane is sex. And so that little group was like, okay, how do we meet with the divine through sex with a partner?
So cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
So cool. You're making me think of actually the good life that Socrates talks about, which I remember studying in college. And I like shifted this in my life. Like, like you're at your parents' house, you blow your nose, you throw the tissue and it doesn't go in the trash. And like you see it and you're like, okay, I don't care about that. And then I realized like understanding the good life of Socrates, it's like doing the right thing, like being at the right place at the right time and doing the right thing. And it made me think about that. And then, the next time I threw the tissue and it didn't go in the trash, I was like, I'm gonna pick that up and I'm gonna put that in the trash. And I picked it up with joy and with love and with my mom in mind, because I'm like, if I don't pick this up, I know my dad's not gonna pick it up. I know my brother's not gonna pick it up. She's gonna pick it up. So like I'm doing like the right the right thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it is. That's like tantra. That's like, okay, I'm going to weave in the sacred and the divine into whatever and make it a spiritual practice.
Mm.
Pretty
It's
cool.
like being present almost as well. It's so crazy how I feel like every single one of these things, like we use different words to talk about the same thing.
Well, it's similar. There was something that I've been really looking at is like mindfulness or being present is really just the first step. Like you
Mm.
really have to close, like, not close your mind down, but like you have to slow it down enough to be able to sit still and be present, or to be able to be really mindful while you're walking or whatever, in order to open up to the next stages, right? And yoga talks about that. I don't necessarily agree with like closing off all the senses. Tantra's like open all the senses and feel everything and make it all, you know, sacred. And more traditional yoga is like close it all down and like basically die and stop breathing. It's like, okay, they're a little bit different. They're both fine, but they're a little different. Um, but yeah, I don't remember what I was saying now, but yeah. Anyway, there's something that you were gonna say that I was gonna say, but it'll come back to me if it's important. It's just a fun topic. I'm like, oh yeah, what else can I share? It's so great. Um, so yeah.
How did you discover it? You first heard about it in your training course when you first learned about Tantra. And like after that, did that spark your curiosity right away? And did you get into this 10 years ago? Or is this a newer thing that you have started practicing?
Yeah, I mean, I was always pretty obsessed with sex. and
Same.
love. I always thought they were such great things that our culture didn't really like help anybody with.
Yeah.
So I did learn about it in my teacher training. They talked about it, but I also, when I started doing Ayurveda, it kind of came up again, which was only a year later after my teacher training. So I graduated my training. It was like, yeah, it was like 10 years ago. Um, so then I met someone who had been practicing Tantra, and he had a meditation practice, and he had been doing this for a long time. So I was able to make love with him, and we like disappeared from reality. I mean, like I was gone. I was in this space with God. Like it felt like I was being hugged by God, and the other person wasn't even there anymore. Like I dropped into such a deep state of love and bliss that for days it was like my vision, it was like I was on LSD or something. Like everything was so sparkly and almost breathing and moving, and I was like, well, this is from sex. I was like,
Whoa.
why is no one doing this? I was like, why is no one talking about this? This is crazy. And I think it's just because a lot of people don't know that that's possible. Um,
Yeah.
but once that was a pretty short relationship. It was really, I think, karmically came into my life just to teach me what was possible. And so I started to look for partners, and this might be something that you want to consider is looking for partners who had a deep meditation practice. Because especially for men to get to the super deeper levels of tantra or sacred sex, they're not really supposed to be coming. That takes a lot of control. And it takes a lot of body awareness and meditation power, if you will, or energy practice in order to be able to transmute the sexual energy into spiritual energy and move it up through their body instead of out. So this partner that I had, who I was having the sacred sex with, he was able to do that. And so what happened is because I was multi-orgasmic and he was multi-orgasmic, not ejaculating, the energy then could start to ebb and flow between us, and you could feel it moving. And that was kind of the beginning, right? Because it eventually got into this space of oneness in God, and reality is gone, right? But like that was the beginning, and it's like these waves, and it's not as intense as a climax for either person, but eventually the waves can become sort of that intense, but they're not. It's not like an exploding. It's like a little bit different. But I think it's easier for women, honestly. Yes.
It's like you go up and you're at your climax and then you kind of like stay there once you get to this like the sacred space, the oneness space.
Kind of. I mean, I don't want to say too, like, you got to explore a little on your own. Like, I don't want to say too much. I'm sure it's different for everyone. But yeah, I mean, it's like getting, for us, when we were in that space and when I tried it with other partners, it's like when you can drop into a meditative space with the other person and they have enough control to not, ejaculate or end it, and they can kind of experience these subtle waves of energy, then it goes back and forth. And then that's where you get into all the different traditions, because then you can move the two snakes up your body and then they can dance with each other, or you can do this circle thing where it goes through you into them and through them into you. Like there's a lot of different types of moving the energy, but it takes a while, I think, for most people to master that, unless it's their karma or dharma to just drop into it with someone, which is great. I hope that's the case for more people soon, because it's really fun. It's really powerful, and it's
So
like
cool.
it doesn't work if you want it to happen, though, Erin. That's the hard part. Is like you can't be attached to the outcome of it. And with a
Mm.
partner, you have to really go into this space and just be. You're basically worshiping them. So you have to be able to be that vulnerable and have that much trust to like get to the fun stuff, if you will. Um, so that is the hard
Yeah,
part that I've found. Hmm. Go ahead.
that speaks to one of my questions, like can anyone practice it, which the answer is yes, but yeah, like what do you need to do in order to prepare for it? And I think that's when the topic of like trauma can come up, like what do you have from your past that you need to get rid of, and including shadow work, which I feel like I'm at that phase now where it's like I've noticed things that I'm like, okay, I need to like work on those, and I've worked on them, and of course it's never over, and I'm like, and there's more, but like what is it? So is there any like clearing strategies or anything, or is practicing, can that help to clear some stuff, maybe like masturbation wise?
Yeah, well, both. Yeah, yes, and I mean, so there's you can do, and I've done this meditation several times. You can do a meditation where you visualize someone that either hurt you, or maybe it's just someone you had sex with that you sort of regretted or whatever, and you see the golden cord, or it could be any color, but you see the cord that's connecting your hearts, and you thank them, and then you lovingly and gracefully release the cord back to them. And so you visualize it
Mm.
separating, and you go through everybody that you feel like you need to, which for me was a lot of people, and just like releasing and clearing and cleansing that energy. And I did feel more free, and I did feel more whole after doing that. So there's that. But then there's also a practice which, I mean, I don't know if we could do this on the podcast, but it takes a few minutes. Well, I'll just share it with you, and then maybe we'll do a little, but not really. So like abdominal breathing, where you breathe in to your stomach and you feel your abdomen expand, and then you exhale, right? So that's the prep
Hmm.
you would do. So if you want to do a couple of those breaths now, you can. If you're listening to this podcast, you can do that now too, right? If you're having a hard time, if you're not in yoga teacher training and you don't really know how to do that breath, if you plug your nose a little bit and breathe in, you'll feel your abdomen. So that's a good way to get used to doing those type of breaths. And allow your awareness to focus on your pelvic floor. So breathe in and fill all the spaces in your pelvic floor. Every nook and cranny is being, filling with breath. And so you would want to continue this for a few minutes generally, but we're going to jump ahead to the next part of it just for the sake of the conversation in the podcast. So the next step is you're breathing into the pelvic floor. So this is alchemy, and alchemy, the container for the alchemy is your awareness. So try to stay really focused. You breathe into the pelvic floor, and then as you exhale, breathe from your perineum up to the crown of your head. Like there's a channel there. So breathing in, pelvic floor, exhale, perineum to the crown of the head.
What is perineum?
Perineum is that spot between your anus and vagina. It's like the base, lowest part of your anatomy,
Mm.
bottom. It's the
It's the
part,
fork in the road for the penis when someone doesn't know what they're doing when they're having sex, and it like goes the
maybe,
wrong way instead of one way.
right. So anyway, we don't have to continue, but that idea, that's from one of my favorite books on this stuff, which is the Magdalene Manuscript, which I highly recommend to everyone. It's by Tom Kenyon and Judy Sion, and the subtitle is The Alchemies of Horus and the Sex Magic of Isis.
Mm.
Right, and so it's Tom Kenyon and Judy Sion channeling Mary Magdalene and what her sex practice with Jesus was, which is pretty cool. If that intrigues you, get the book,
Wow.
read it. There's so many different sexual practices in there to like, and meditations to try as a lone practitioner, that I think are just great. But that's the idea. And basically what starts to happen is you start to feel the Kundalini energy at the base of your spine awaken, essentially.
Mm.
So you can do that alone, and then you could turn it into some type of, if you wanted to masturbate. I've had some pretty crazy energy experiences alone. I mean, I like to share the one with a lover because I think a lot of people don't know that's possible. But
Mm.
yeah, I'm trying to like. So I know for people on the podcast can't see this, but I'll show you. This is kind of like the two snakes from the base of the
Mm-hmm.
spine up. So it's like your yin and your yang, or your feminine and your masculine energy, and you balance those. So first is just to start to feel that central channel. Then it's to move both of the energies. But anyways, you can get the book. It's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun. This is my favorite book in the world.
Very cool. Would you say that practicing sacred sex can help you to balance your male and feminine energy? Or is that something you want to maybe work on before you enter the space of practicing sacred sex?
Yes, it can help you balance. It can also help you heal the sexual trauma. Back to
Mm.
the other topic. By doing practices alone and sticking with it and moving through some of those experiences, that can be healing. But I think also because because getting to that space of love um, is spiritual and consuming, it has the power to heal you. I mean, I think for me, it jumped me forward in my enlightenment or awareness. Like it changed me forever. And so you asked, I think, in the questions, one of the interview questions, so you were like, oh, I was curious about this, was, you know, what are the precautions, if there is any, for sacred sex? And I don't really think there's precautions. However, I love everyone that I had sacred sex with. I don't know how to not love them because we were sharing in like this divine universal love. So a lot of traditions, but not all of them, would say you only really want to practice with one partner.
Mm.
Ideally your life partner, right? I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think it is important to share because depending on who you are and what your journey is, it might not be appropriate for some people to share that with, if you're kind of a one guy, girl for the rest of your life kind of person, and you're highly loyal and very sensitive, maybe depending on you specifically, you might not want to do that. For me, I don't think it was that harmful. I just know, like, I can list now all the people that I had sacred sex with. It's like four of them. I really love them, and I don't necessarily talk to them, but I feel like I could. And it feels very free. It feels very healing to me. Um, so that was one thing that I did want to mention with that.
Mm. I relate to that. I feel like I could probably do that as well with more than one person and not feel like strange with that. You just made me think of another question. So, having sex is, of course, an exchange of energy. And so, is sacred sex more of an exchange of energy? And does that mean we should be thoughtful when picking the partners that we do choose to do sacred sex with?
Uh, yes. I mean, yeah, it is always an exchange of energy. I believe that if you have sex with someone, that energy is going to be there. Even if you release the ties and do a lot of healing, there's still, I think that for at least a lot of people, I think for me, even though I've done that with pretty much everyone, I still will have a random thought or a random dream about someone that I was intimate with. And I think that that's that energy exchange. Um, so there's definitely a lot more energy, like circling and dancing around the whole room and the whole space when you're moving into that. It's kind of a cool thing. But really, the first step is to find partners who are willing to keep eye contact and breathe deeply. I mean, that's like 101 step, because then you'll start to feel the energy start to shift. It'll shift in
Mm.
the room, it'll shift in your body, it'll probably shift in their body, and uh, it's vulnerable. That's why I said it's hard if you haven't done enough of your own healing. It's hard to, if you don't love yourself, you can't really have sacred sex. Like, they have to love
Yeah.
themselves, and you have to love yourselves, and then you have to be able to trust each other and be vulnerable and make eye contact to start to feel some of that spiritual energy move.
So beautiful. So, what is the process? So, eye contact and breathing. And what about before that? Is there like a setup? Like, are we lighting a candle? Are we saying a prayer? Are we meditating? Maybe there are different ways to do it. But, like, say people listening right now are like, I got my boo. We love each other. I love myself. Like, we're trying to let's do it, like what would they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. For this one, I would recommend another book, which is The Art of Sexual Ecstasy. It's from this lady, I think it's like from the 80s, so like pardon some of the lingo. It's like a little bit outdated. However, she basically stumbled into sacred sex and then studied all of the traditions and then put it all together in this book for Westerners because they're mostly Eastern practices, which I thought was really cool. And so, in there, one of the first things that she suggests for partners is to do a heart salutation. So, that's what I started doing with I think I did with all of my partners for that. It was a heart salutation where you can do it a couple different ways, but I like doing it where you sit naked, kind of like I guess the girl would sort of be on top, but not really. Like your thighs could be like over his legs, and you put your hands on each other's heart and breathe and dedicate the practice to each other or love or God or whatever what really resonates for you, but as seeing each other as the divine.
Mm.
And that seemed to work for me. That seemed to work pretty well. But I think it is important to have an intention. I think that it's important to have light. I don't know if you could really have the eye contact in the dark. I don't remember when I stopped having sex in the dark, but it was a long time ago. Probably when I
Me too.
got
Yeah, I
into
love some lights. I love a mirror. I don't know if that's sacred or not.
Well, I think you bring up a great point is I think in the best scenarios or like one of the most fun sacred sex times, I think it ebbed and flowed and pulsated between sacred and primal. And I
Cool.
definitely was the man or the masculine. Like I was the masculine and he was the feminine, and the roles were interchangeable, which was I think really beautiful. Um, so yeah, I think it helps to have candles and do a heart salutation, set an intention. I mean, you at least got to have a conversation about some of it, like, hey, this is vulnerable, and like, hey, we might always feel a lot of like love, like agape love for each other. You know, it's kind of I think is important to not trick any guys into having sacred sex or anything.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That's actually something my friend mentioned, that it's possible to do this work, or the Tantra branches of Tantra, which were like healing, magic. I forget the other ones. There was either four or five, she said. And she said, like, you could be having sex with someone and you could be doing that on your own without them knowing. Um, and I don't know. We both were like, like, what do we think about that? Like, healing maybe feels ethical, because like the question is, are you using the person or not? Like, are you doing something without consent in that situation?
I think it would depend on exactly what you're doing and how far you're going. As far as making contact and keeping your mind present with sensations and the other person with your breath, I think that that's fine. I don't think that you're not technically getting into anything too crazy except just it's sex as a meditation at that point. I would
Mm.
probably still say like, hey, I'm gonna be meditating while we're having sex, and that just means I'm going to focus on my breath, and you're invited to do that too. That kind of thing. You could do something like that because it's not. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Generally, it's good to communicate. like,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
Agree with that. Yeah, I feel like if I didn't say something, that would be distracting me, and I wouldn't be able to be present, because I'd be like, oh no, am I like doing something unethical? And I'd like get in my head too much.
right. And
Yeah.
that's the main problem with like I don't know what word to say, primal sex or normal sex. I mean, yeah, a lot of people are using each other as objects. That's a problem. But I think that the other is that it's hard to be mindful and present and like literally just focus on sensations and breath. And this is why for me, it was it took me years to get good at meditating, get good, whatever, whatever that means, get good,
Yeah.
quote quote. Um, But it took me a long time to quiet my mind and be able to sit for 45 minutes and for it to feel like 2 minutes and or whatever it is. Like to be able to do that. It took years of teaching yoga and meditation, but with tantra or sacred sex, mindful sexuality or sex as a meditation, I I could focus so much easier on sensations and breath that I was dropping into deeper states through sex. And I think that's what the tantra yogis kind of found was like, oh hey, this is an easier path to enlightenment. And if you're studying yoga, so bhakti yoga is said to be the fastest way to the divine, and so is tantra, like
Mm,
devotion and sex. And if you put them together, like that really is what sacred sex is, because you're devoting yourself and worshiping and honoring the other person, and they're doing that back to you. And when you do that, that's when you, right? So it's kind of interesting how both of those things are like considered the fastest forms in yoga to enlightenment.
super cool. And I like it as well because there are other shortcuts available to access source or to get closer to source, like in the drug world. And it feels really beautiful and amazing that there's this other shortcut that doesn't involve drugs, just the love drug chemical in your brain.
Oh yeah, and you can totally release that, and it does. I telling you, for days, I loved everything more. Felt like it was pouring out of me. I was like, I kept looking at my hands and looking at stuff like, what happened to me? Because it was more powerful, I think, than substances. I was like, wow, this is, why is no one talking about this? I was like, this is crazy to me. And I think, I taught a sacred sex class. I called it Love Alchemy. And what I found is it's really not, it doesn't really work unless you really love yourself. Like you really have to be on a self-healing slash remembering journey and love yourself, and to be able to start to enter into that space. Otherwise, or if you have stuff going on, like say you already have a partner and you guys are already working on things, it's pretty hard to just jump into bliss. Like it kind of it's like everything else. Like in order to really manifest, or in order to really get to where you feel like your soul is calling you in dharma, you actually have to deal with your shit. Like you actually have to deal with your stuff. And I think it's the same with sacred sexuality.
That's beautiful. So we had sex, we met God. What do we do after that? Like, is there like a closing ceremony, just like a simple high five or a trophy ceremony?
Yeah, that's another great question. And it just brought back like a really beautiful memory. So the person that introduced me to sacred sexuality, he would take his hands, like the palms of his hands, and press firmly on my vagina to like close off, like to end the ceremony. And it felt so healing and like, oh, okay, like just hit the warmth in his hands and the love, and it was like, all right, I'm going to kind of seal or something. I don't know. I don't really know. I didn't. I don't think I ever asked him either. I was just like, well, this is nice. I feel like, but I very like the cool thing about being with him as introductory to this was that had already practiced it. So he already had some skills as far as his mind. He already had a meditation practice, and then he really, I felt worshipped. I felt adored. I
Mm,
felt different than I had ever felt with a man, because he was honoring me so much. And like the beginning of like when there's still words is like, I'm grateful for your lips, and I'm grateful for your hair and your hips, and you're beautiful, and like let me, and it was like very much like a worshiping thing. And I had to be okay to receive that. When we talk about the heart chakra, like giving and receiving, you have to be able to receive that and give it. So
mm.
yeah, but yeah, I liked that. I'm trying to think if there was really anything else. um I feel like it's pretty natural to want to be like cuddling or having some type of closure for sure. Yeah, but I like that hand, if the partner is willing to put their hands there. That felt really nice.
Very cool. Seal it up. And did he do something for himself on that end as well, like cap it down, or
Cap it down.
or
I
maybe
don't.
not?
I don't think so. Not that I remember. I mean, it was a while ago, but not that I really remember. I think it was, but because he was so focused on taking care of me, so I don't really know if there was something else.
Maybe he did something in his head, or maybe he did something himself. My internet just went a little loopy. Can you hear me?
I can. So the last thing I heard was maybe he did something in his head.
Yeah. Like to seal it for himself.
Yeah, and I think we might have put our hands on each other's hearts again. There was definitely like, thank you. Like there was, we honored each other and thanked each other for the practice. It really is, it really was more of a meditation than sex. That's how it felt to me. It was like
Mm,
a really deep, powerful meditation. Um, so,
very cool. Is there any connection to, so like having an intention is probably a powerful thing. What if two people are wanting to make a baby? Is sacred sex something that you would recommend like for that purpose?
yeah, I'd recommend quite a few things for that purpose. But that's something I'm looking into, right, with my partner is like, oh, do we want to have a baby sometime? Um, so I'm looking at the Vedic astrology, like, okay, what kind of soul, like, how are we gonna, what kind of body is this soul gonna come into? But there's also like there's womb chakra healing. So for anyone that has trauma, I think it's great to work with a teacher that's focused on the womb healing or womb chakra. There's a ashram in California. There's a class I took, which was the womb chakra. I think it was called Holy Womb Chakra. That was the name of the class. But there's
Cool.
mantras in the advanced class for having a baby. And my partner said he would chant them with me because we have to chant them while we're having sex or making love, right? We have to chant them for a certain amount of times or whatever. So like I was so happy when he was willing to do that. But it's basically just to bless the child, like to bring all of the beautiful, healthy things. So I think that as humanity is evolving, way more practices, mindful and sacred practices, are going to be popping up for people to do um, when they are procreating, when they're like, yes, we're going to make a baby this time, or at least try. So I think that that's a kind of a cool thing we're gonna see is more chanting or mindful sexuality for sure. I think at the very least you would want to have sacred sex. That baby would be like so loving. Like, of course you would want to at least do that, but you could go the extra mile and chant and do all kinds of things. So,
So cool. Yeah, and I wonder if with like I'm 29, so a lot of my friends are around my age or 10, 15 years older, and I hear a lot of fertility like issue stories among my friends, and I wonder if this is something that will kind of leak more into, because like holistic stuff is out there. I don't know if this falls into the umbrella of holistic, but I guess probably it would in a way. I wonder if this is a strategy that people might employ to, like, when, in vitro didn't work, however many times, maybe people will try to connect with spirit and see if
oh,
that magic works.
oh, for sure. And I think that it would definitely help for sure because of all of the stuff that is involved, because it's holistic to be having sacred sex. I think it would definitely help fertility. It's just like the intention and the mind. If our minds are really as powerful as we're starting to find out when they're used as tools, then I feel like believing that you could have a baby and with a partner that believes that and then having sacred sex like would totally up your chances.
Yeah, it's the story we tell ourselves, you know, like the story you tell yourself is the story that you live. Um, so yeah, if you're in that victim mentality, then that's where you're at, unable to manifest and unable to have control. And even though of course we're surrendering, but we're also in control. It's the polarity, like everything.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the stuff that, I'm teaching with young girls, like, really is the foundation of how to stay fertile, like cycling with the moon, living in a circadian rhythm, like staying up late at night can be bad for fertility. I mean, there's some pretty interesting facts coming out now with that. But I also think the less medications that you consume helps. Like the healthier, the more natural you can be, definitely more likely. So, but it's a combo of things, and then there's karma, right? And then there's people's journey, and maybe they have to, like, maybe they're not having trouble having kids because there's something in their self love, or there's something that they need to do in order to then receive a child, right? So who knows? Like, it's very complicated. But it's also like the most powerful thing I think women, what we can do. We can create life. We can create this baby. It's pretty magical.
It's crazy. It really is crazy. Speaking of kids, is sacred sex something you would include in your first sex talk, like with the child, or is that the sex talk?
Well, it's so funny that you asked that because I was talking to my partner about that for my son because my son is 7. He has a crush on his classmate. Like things are right. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that anatomy, what my partner said is, I think we need to go over the anatomy first. And then if you want to talk to him about the energy, and the sacred sexuality, he's like, that would come second. But I think it's something as far as being a parent to my child, something that's going to have to be like an ongoing, nurturing conversation, which is why with the course for girls, it's like the first course is about your period and really planting the seeds so that when they're in high school, like that second level of the course, you can actually get into that a little bit.
Mm,
It's tricky when you're not, when they're not 18, like, how much I can say and
r-
what exactly
right. Yeah.
it could, so I think that ultimately I'd like to have a spiritual center where people 18 to 25 can come and learn about sacred sexuality and spirituality, and maybe we can take the suicide rates down with that. Be
Yeah.
one of my goals for that would be to help save some lives because that's number one killer right now in America.
Suicide.
Yep, above car accidents.
That is surprising and not surprising at the same time. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. So that was a vision that came in for me this January was like, yep, you're going to build the center. It's going to have, there's going to be they can work on the land and whatever, but it's going to be a sacred space for young people to come, and really connect with themselves and their sexual nature and also their relationships, like being in a right relationship with yourself, so you can be right in a enlightened or lovely, mindful relationship with someone else, sacred relationship with someone else. When what I've read about sacred relationships is it's not for the faint of heart. It's not something that because it means you don't hold any cards. Like if you imagine like you're playing poker or something and you're holding all these cards, you're like, oh, I'm not going to tell him this thing, or I'm not. I would say my relationship with my partner is a sacred relationship because we tell each other everything, and we've always played all cards onto the table. Like, yep, here's this card, here's this card. Like, I'm not really proud of this, but I did this, and or whatever, and it allows the energy and the alchemy of our relationship to continue to like ebb and flow and pulse and like it's just like really magical, but there's not a lot of couples I see doing that.
Yeah, my friend has a joke like we met a few couples last year. I traveled with her to the Caribbean and we met like two really cool couples. And she was like, "Wow, like you're like really cool." So like her joke is like the amount of married couples that I'm jealous of like continues to remain at zero. Like she's like, I'm not seeing like a lot of like cool like examples or exemplars of like a relationship that she would want. So I feel really grateful for my travels to yes meet people in those cool badass relationships. Like you're one of those people we haven't met ever in person, but yeah, it's beautiful to know that it is possible and that it does exist and it can be done.
Yeah, it can be done. And I think that it really does. Like I think being in this journey of sacred sexuality for myself, learning how to love myself, and then being able to go into a relationship and be like, look, this is what I need. This is who I am. This is what I suck at. Like, this is the stuff that, like, I'm really not that great at this. Um, and this is what I need from our relationship. And, like, one thing we always said was, like, I'm going to take care of me, you're going to take care of you, and we're both going to take care of the relationship. So I'm not, then it takes away the codependency, right? I don't have to take care of him. He doesn't have to take care of me. And it doesn't mean we're not helping each other all the time. We are. And we point
Yeah,
out things. But it's like we're both in charge of maintaining a healthy, happy relationship. And that seems to be working pretty great so far. So,
that's beautiful. So I take care of myself, you take care of yourself, and we both take care of the relationship. Which means if your partner's sick, you are taking care of them if they need soup or something.
right, of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
totally. But it's just
Cool.
to not fall into codependency or like outdated gender roles,
Yeah.
if you will, right? We're pretty big on like being equal partners with each other, like in all things. And that's different. It's interesting to see how people, interpret us. I think it does confuse people sometimes, but it's
Mm.
works for us, so we're gonna keep doing it.
Understood by the majority of people is a compliment, I think.
At least right now. Yeah, I guess so.
We're shifting more people. Yeah, like I feel like more people are yeah, starting to realize that something's like a little fishy. Like, I don't know, like like we learn in elementary school, like that the pilgrims and the Native Americans like all high-fived and had dinner. It's like, nah. Like that's just one little example. It's like maybe not. Maybe
Right,
not.
yeah. That's not exactly what happened. It was not so pleasant as the story goes, with a lot of things actually from history. But as far as that goes, too,
Exactly.
there's also the Great Cosmic Mother rediscovering the religions of the earth. That's also a really cool book for learning about femininity and sacred sexuality and the history that's not taught. That's really kind of awesome. But it's definitely a feminist book. I mean, I would say it's pretty pro women. But they talk about the static dance and dropping into bliss through dance, and that's something that I do every Sunday sober. I go to the park and dance and I bliss myself out. And I think that movement and community, like, my I haven't had a threesome that was sacred sex necessarily. I'll say yet. I'll just say yet. Haven't had one. But my friend who, like the person that I first was with, he did, and he said that it was two guys. It was him and another friend of his and a woman, and that they took turns worshiping each other.
Mm.
And I was like, that sounds awesome. Like, who wouldn't want to do that? So I think it is, you can do it sacred sex alone. You can have sacred sexuality alone, and a lot of times, if you do think about something you want to manifest while you're doing that, it adds more energy to what you're feeling called to do. But I also think it could be, two people or beyond. I don't think it has to be, I think it's really just the direction that humanity needs to go in order to heal all this BS with using each other and hurting each other and, I don't know, Tinder, whatever.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Earlier when you were mentioning the 18 to 25-year-old girls and suicide, I was just thinking about like my college days and how I noticed that a lot of my friends and myself included, for me, I think it was subconsciously for me because I was like, I was like, I know I'm hot, like I know I'm like whatever. But a lot of my friends I feel like would hook up with guys and like that was their validation. So it was like that was like, yeah, I'm hot because this guy like wants to have sex with me, when in reality in college, like anyone would probably have sex with anyone. So it's not even like communicating that really, and that outside validation is what trips us up so much, because it's not anything. Inner validation, self-validation is the ultimate, and you can't actually even have like true outer validation till you validate yourself first on the inside. And I think like we have it twisted and backwards in this world right now. Like it's like on Tinder, okay, like, oh, we matched, so that means I'm cute. It's like, no, you're cute before you made your Tinder. Like you were cute before you were born. Like you're perfect before you were born already. Like you don't need someone on Tinder to tell you that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of self confidence and self love to get to that space. But I think it's exactly the same for sacred sex. To get to that space, yeah, gotta have that self love and self worth. And
Mm.
it can take a while to get there. So that's why I want to help shortcut it. And it's actually men that are committing suicide more, because I think that women have more power now, and it's a little confusing. I feel,
Mm.
I feel really bad for for a lot of young men, because they just feel like, okay, well, no one wants me, so I'm just gonna take my life, or what, and it's pretty rough. So I think that I would have, men and women. I would have, and they'll probably have sex with each other at the center. Like, I can't really stop them. That's why they got to be over 18. You know what I mean? Who knows? I don't know where it will all go, but I do know that if there had been a space like that, that would have really helped me explore myself, and my relationships, and really set a foundation for self love. You know.
Me too, because yeah, like I have had sex with men, like more than two people, of course, like many people as like a young person. And in my mind, it was just fun and enjoyable. But really looking back, what was it? Like, was I like getting more energy from that, or was I depleting my energy? And I think the answer more often than not was I was like giving away my energy and not like reinforcing or re-energizing myself. So if I had learned about sacred sex at a younger age, I think I could have started the process sooner and would have less trauma. And of course, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. And it's great that sacred sex, and specifically doing it alone, can help with healing. And I'm really excited to start like exploring that myself. Yeah.
Yeah,
And to
I'm
set
so
that healing intention.
yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because like that is the sign. Like, that is how you know whether or not you had like a meditative or like leaning towards sacred or sacred sexual experience or not. Because afterwards, your cup should feel like it's overflowing, or you should at least feel like you have got as much energy as you gave, or there should be no depletion or icky feelings. If there is, then that wasn't you didn't get it wasn't quite sacred yet, right? If there's any of that, then it's missing the type of love that we're trying to become, right, through sacred sex. So I'm so glad you brought up that energy thing, because after my encounter, I was still navigating and trying to figure out, like, find partners that could do this with me. And when I felt icky or depleted energetically afterwards, I was like, okay, that was not sacred sex. And like, that was how I figured out, okay, if I feel more of myself and more love for them and the world, okay, then we got it. We did it. we made it to a sacred space, even if we weren't exchanging orgasms back and forth or colors or whatever, at least we got to a space where we're both feeling more full and loved instead of used or depleted. So thank you for bringing that in at the end, because it's so important.
Yeah, you just made me think of like how everything's a spectrum too. So you could have sex with someone and just feel like super cool after and super great, and that's it. Or it could be like your first experience, like, whoa, like I'm somewhere, I don't know where I am. And now I'm out in the world 3 days later and I feel like I'm looking at a tree, like I'm on acid. Like, so it's going to be different every time, maybe, and with different people. So that's good to know too. It's not like there's there's successful, but there's all different types of success within the success of having sacred sex.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that in, that there is a spectrum, because just being mindful, just having mindful sex and choosing partners mindfully and then having mindful sex is like going to feel way better than some of this lower vibrational stuff that we're seeing in society or that I've participated in. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, New Year's Eve, you got to find someone to go home with. Like, no, you don't. Like, please.
I literally this New Year's I was like, okay, like I like want to kiss somebody, and I had someone I could have kissed, and I was like, he's like dumb. Like, no offense to dumb people, but I was like, I don't want to kiss him. Like, and I was like, so I'm not going to. And I went home before midnight, and I was alone in my bed at midnight, and I was like, yes, girl, like that's cool.
That is cool. Yeah, I was playing cards with my 91-year-old grandmother and my son on New Year's, and we went to bed at like 10:30. So, you know, it's evolution is what that is. Because I definitely remember a New Year's Eve where I was at a dance, and it was like you could tell, like you can feel it when people are like trying to find their person to go home with, and it's like what is this energy? Like what are we doing? Is anybody thinking about what we're doing? No, everyone's just like, this is what you do. And I'm not judging anyone, because I don't think this information's out there. You're
Mhm.
asking about it, and you're in yoga teacher training, like, but beyond the yoga consciousness community, like, I really don't think people, like, what I told this one guy that I was into sacred sex, he was like, oh, so sacred sex is your fetish. And I was like, no, not
You're not gonna find that on Pornhub, sir.
I was like, not exactly. Like, I feel like, yeah, and that's another thing. I wish sacred sex could be, like, I guess, I mean, it's not really porn. I don't even think you could classify it as porn, but I wish it could be something that, people could watch or something, because it's hard on those porn sites even to just find two people that look like they're making love. I mean, it's so
Yeah,
fake.
yeah.
So that's a whole nother issue.
Lots of topics for future podcasts.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having this lovely conversation with me and sharing and being vulnerable. And yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions and for sharing your experiences too. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, hopefully you learned some things that you can take with you, and you'll have to update me on your future explorations.
Yes, next time we talk, I'll let you know what I see when connected to source.
Awesome. Well, thank you.